Hey, I wanted to ask you, I hate that we're spending so much time talking about Goldberg, but man, this he's been a part of a meme, I guess. I mean, I thought for a long time that certainly Bret was just having fun with it. But Bret Hart has made it almost predictable, and I think it's hilariously fun. And Goldberg was recently asked about all the comments he's heard from Bret Hart. And here's what he said. And this is over at Busted Open Radio, by the way. The Bret Hart thing, it just saddens me as a human being. That's all. First and foremost, I would never wish ill on any opponent or anyone like that. Having an accident like that happen and end someone's career, especially someone who's one of the best that ever was, 100%, it sucks. I'm not asking anybody to understand. I'm just saying, leave me alone, dude. Yes, sir. 100%. Put your hand up. Do whatever you got to do. It is what it is. Come on, man. I love you, Bret. Don't be such a prick. That's all. Grow up. And I wanted to get your take on that because I kind of thought that Bret was just tongue in cheek, having fun with it.
No.
And you don't believe that to be the case. And I know you've been another victim of some of Bret's comments through the years. What do you think of Goldberg's response? Hey man, grow up.
I don't know if it's immaturity on Bret's part, but he is a miserable human being and he hasn't been able to move on. Now maybe he's happy in other parts of his life and it's just not apparent. But anytime we see or hear from Bret, it's so fucking miserable. He's just oh God, talk about a negative human being. He's like a giant rain cloud that just mopes around and will bitch and whine and moan and blame anybody he can blame to who's ever willing to listen. I mean, that's who Bret is. And I feel bad for Bret. I've talked about this a million times. He's achieved so much. He's done things that very few people in the world will ever get an opportunity to even imagine, more or less, actually do. He's made a fortune. He's There's no reason for this guy to be as dark and miserable as he is. Yes, he got hurt. Yes, he and I'm just going to say it. I'd like to go back and watch that match and look very closely at the contact from that kick because I'm not 100% convinced and probably never will be or never could be convinced that the injury that Bret sustained was a result of that kick. Because if you go back and you look at what happened earlier in that match, there was a spot where Bret was wrapped around the ring post and bounced his head. It was either off the ring or off the floor
Floor.
pretty severely. Could that have been it? Was it the kick? I don't know. And I'll be honest, after watching that as closely as I did, Bret did have his hand up. You know, yes, the kick made contact. I have been kicked in the head a lot. Many, way more than Bret Hart or Bill Goldberg when I was training in martial arts. And I've been kicked in the fucking head hard enough to drop me and knock me out. But that injury, I'm not 100% convinced that it happened as a result of the kick. At the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter. It happened. He can no longer wrestle. He severe injury, no doubt about it. But at some point, you've got to wake up in the morning and go, you know what? I still have the rest of my life to live. I still have things I want to accomplish. And letting go of that baggage is probably one of the key things that Bret needs to do in order to move on and find any enjoyment in his life, other than enjoying the fact that he can go out and bury Bill Goldberg or Eric Bischoff or Vince McMahon. Or, I heard him the other day talking about Paul Levesque and Paul's ability as head of creative at WWE. Shit all over Paul. I mean, have you not been watching television, Bret? It's like Bret Hart thinks he's the only one in all of professional wrestling over the last 50 years that knows what he's talking about. And it's just depressing. I like Bret. There are a lot of good things about Bret. He's an interesting, educated, smart guy. He's well-rounded. He's got interesting views of the world. But man, when it comes to talking about wrestling, he's just so fucking miserable. It's like, I hate listening to him, not because I don't want to hear what he has to say necessarily, but it's just always the same. It's just so dark and miserable and blames everybody for everything. Like this fucking guy has never done anything wrong, never made a bad choice, never been in a situation that he regrets. It's just always everybody else. And it's tiresome. And I think it's sad. You know, you want to see guys like Bret Hart go out in a positive way. When I say go out, I'm not talking about in ring. I'm talking about what happens after the ring, because as we all know, guys like Ric Flair, Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker, they're all doing things and being positive or attempting to be. And the only one that's not is Bret. He just fucking mopes and looks for a crowd that's willing to listen to him bury people. That's his niche in life. It's too bad.
Let's talk a little bit about I know that we've probably beat the Bret Hart thing to death, but I do want to at least remind everybody that no matter what you think happened with that kick or didn't happen with that kick, Bret had 9 more matches in WCW after that. And not necessarily easy ones. I mean, 4 matches later, he was doing a hardcore match with Terry Funk on Thunder. He wrestled
Yeah.
Chris Benoit 2 matches later. He did have a rematch with Goldberg like the next freaking night. And he would finish up in WCW working on TV and house shows against Kevin Nash and Sid Vicious. I mean, this was just bungled all the way around. And I don't think for a minute, I mean, I always go back to the intent. I don't think for a minute that Goldberg intentionally hurt Bret Hart.
Hell no.
So I get being upset and I get being frustrated, but I just always go back to intent. Like it's just hard for me to imagine that he would intentionally hurt Bret. So
He wouldn't, Conrad. That is the most absurd thing that anybody could say, that there was intent behind that. There wasn't. You can accuse him of being sloppy. You can accuse Bill Goldberg of attempting to do something he probably wasn't quite capable of doing well. You can point out a lot of things that should not have happened because of the amount of experience that Bill Goldberg had. But let's be honest, who was the ring general in there? Who was calling that match? Who should have taken responsibility to make sure that there was nothing going to happen in the match that Bret wasn't prepared for? That's Bret's fault as much as it is Bill Goldberg's fault. That's the part of me that gets half pissed off. And it's not because I have this close relationship with Bill Goldberg. We're friendly. I wouldn't even say we're friends. We don't communicate. He didn't send me birthday cards or anything like that. We don't chat on text. If we saw each other, we'd probably sit down and have a beer and share a story or a laugh. But I'm not close to Bill. But let's look at that situation that Bret wants to blame 100% on Bill Goldberg. Who was the experienced performer? Who is the one that should have been actively involved in laying that match out? That's as much Bret's fault as it is Bill Goldberg's fault. Bret was the more experienced, seasoned professional. He was the ring general. The fact that came up was as much Bret's fault as it was Bill Goldberg's fault for not taking the reins and taking responsibility. That's the part I have a bitch with, is blaming it all on Bill. Yeah, Bill made a bad choice. Bill probably got a little amped up. He had a little too much adrenaline running through his veins. Guess what? That's not a fucking secret. Anybody that's known Bill since he broke into the business knows he's quite capable of getting himself a little over amped up. But if you know that going in, why would you not make sure that you knew exactly what was going to happen in that match? That's the part where I think Bret Hart should admit that there was some responsibility on his part, as opposed to constantly blaming Bill Goldberg. And I like Bret. I want to like Bret. There's so many good things about Bret. Man, that dark, miserable bullshit is so fucking tiresome.